Welcome to Purpose Driven Sobriety. Thank you for joining the Purpose Driven Sobriety podcast. My name is Christine and I'm an alcoholic. I would like to thank a very special friend of mine, Mr. Randy Grimes, for sponsoring this episode. He has Athletes in Recovery. Randy Grimes was a player for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 10 years. He was on the show, I think it was episode 4, and he's got a beautiful story of redemption, and he also just walks the walk and talks the talk every single day with Athletes in Recovery. So be sure and check him out. Randy, I love your heart. Thank you so much for sponsoring this episode. So today, on the show, we share our experience, strength, and hope with our journeys through addiction into recovery. And so, when I'm looking for people to come on the show and share their stories, a lot of them come from, and I've said this pretty much every show, I guess, there are so many different recovery pages online that, if you're new to recovery or a veteran in recovery, you can find some community in these pages. And it's just like any other type of meeting. Well, it's not like a meeting in my humble opinion, but just like any meeting, you're going to find your rooms or that's comfortable for you and that fits. So just keep searching until you find the one. But without further ado, I have Mr. Andrew H. Now, do you practice anonymity, Andrew? I don't even think I asked you. I guess not, since you're on video.
Absolutely.
Huh?
With others I do, but not with myself.
I got you. Okay, so Andrew Hartman. Now you're talking to me from Wisconsin. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I know that you've got things going on in your life that need your attention, and I appreciate how you value recovery. So basically, just tell me the deal, what it was like, what happened, what you're like now. We usually talk for about an hour. So, you tell me what happened with you and your story.
Well, my story is really not unique. I was raised in a very religious home, very strict, no TV on Sundays, no cussing, no drinking, no smoking, church. And it was a great upbringing. I had a wonderful family, very loving parents and 4 siblings in a very close household. But I was pretty sheltered. And when I graduated high school, I had never tasted alcohol or tried any drugs or even cigarettes or anything.
Wow.
It's pretty sheltered. And I had 4 grandparents who suffered from alcoholism, and 3 of them were dead when I graduated high school from their alcohol-related complications. And the 4th was in recovery, and I had never known him to drink. He'd been sober almost as long as I'd been alive. So I didn't understand really how alcoholism had impacted my parents, my family. It was all kind of before me and beyond my vision or my understanding, because Grandpa to me was always sober. So I didn't know anything different. Incidentally, I went to my first meeting with him when I was 14. I was visiting him, and an old man came to the door and banged on the screen door and said, "Troy, are you coming to the meeting?" And Troy
Wow.
said, "Yeah, I'll be right there." And I said, "Grandpa, what kind of meeting you got on a Saturday?" He said, "You know what? Why don't you come with me? You might enjoy this." And we went to an AA meeting.
Okay.
And back then, the old men sat around the table and smoked their cigarettes and drank their coffee. And to me, talked about a drink they hadn't had in decades. And I thought they were all crazy. But my grandpa was a pretty tough old guy. And when we were driving away, he said, "Well, boy, what'd you think?" And I struggled to get the words out because you didn't just speak real plainly to him. And I finally got bold and said, "Grandpa, it seemed a little crazy to me because I've never known you to drink, and I don't know what the purpose of that was, but you're no more alcoholic than I am."
No.
And he thought for a minute, and he looked over at me and he said, "Boy, you're probably right about that." It took me 20 years to understand that he was not agreeing with me. He was telling me that I was exhibiting all the signs and symptoms and behaviors that are consistent with alcoholism.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, I was in a meeting 20 years later and it hit me and I'm like, oh my gosh, he knew. Long
Mm.
before I added alcohol to me, I had the behaviors, the immediate gratification and selfishness and manipulation things going on in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was a piece of wisdom that took a long time to germinate, but it was a real blessing to me. Anyway, I went to college, joined a fraternity, and got blackout drunk the very first time I tasted alcohol. And I woke up with a girl I didn't know in a place I didn't recognize, with an earring in my ear, and scared myself to death when I looked in the mirror. And I thought, well, I guess this is what partying is. And I should have known right then that I didn't drink like other people, that I wasn't normal, that there was something different. But I did not have that understanding or that vision. I just thought, this is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it progressed, of course. And I kept feeding the monster, and it grew and grew and grew. And a few decades went by, and lots of complications, broken relationships, uh, not really early on trouble with the law, but the rough, difficult things that come with alcoholism. And then I eventually added some drugs to it, or other drugs, I should say. Um, and I got real caught up in that life, and I was miserable, mostly because I knew better.
Mm-hmm.
From my upbringing and my life previous, the contrast was ugly and harsh for me.
Now, was your grandfather alive during this time?
He actually died my first year in college.
Oh, okay.
And he died sober with
Mm.
18 years sober, and is still to this day one of my heroes. He won the game. That's
Right.
how you do it, is you
Wow.
go out with your sobriety and your dignity, and left a lasting legacy in my life and many others. So yeah, we lost him, but I cherish those years with him. What a great
Sure.
man.
Mm-hmm.
And what an example to me um, of how to stay the course.
Right.
Strong man. So I went through a number of marriages and relationships and jobs and all the consequences that go with excessive everything, because I was very excessive. In fact, my roommate once named me Mr. Immediate Gratification, and I thought it was a compliment. So I got a vanity plate on my Audi that said Mr. IG.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
it made my mother sick. And she said, I just can't believe you want to live that way. And I said, oh, Mom, it's just a thing, and tried to minimize it. But I was living that life in all aspects. If I wanted it right then. And um, there was no stopping what I was after.
Mm.
So I pursued the misery that I gained. I worked hard for it to screw up my great life, and I did a very thorough job of it. The years passed, and I eventually ended up pulled over drunk and hitting a cop and going to prison in Texas for assault on a police officer. Is kind of an ugly thing. And those were some hard years, difficult times. Um, and when I got out, my second day, I went in search of drugs and alcohol.
Mm.
I wasn't done. I wasn't even close. But I had started going to some meetings, accumulated a number of 30, 60, and 90-day chips, but I was not ready to surrender. So I continued traveling that hard road. And then one day, a few years later, I decided I'm done. I had been strung out and drunk for days, and I really had enough, and I was ready to change. So I went down to the local rehab center, determined to do it right. And I said to myself, I'm telling the whole truth. And when I went through the admissions process, I sat down with that nurse, and she said, how much do you drink? How much do you use? How often? When was the last? And all that. And I told it all, which wasn't my way. I was normally very deceitful about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was determined. And when I got to the alcohol part, last, actually, I told her how much I'd been drinking, how recently. And she closed her eyes and put her pen down and looked down at the sheet for a minute. She looked up at me and she said, I'm sorry. We can't admit you. And I said, what? She said, at that level of drinking, you're going to need to be medically detoxed, and we don't have a medical detox bed. And I said, oh, I'll be fine. I've been through this before. Oh, please let me in. And she said, we can't. If you die from your withdrawals, this will
Mm-hmm.
shut this place down, and everyone here will lose their opportunity, and I can't do that to them. And she turned me away.
Mm.
And I went outside, and I was utterly broken. I said, well, I can't get sober. I can't live like this. I don't have any options. And I literally did not see the way out. So Went home to what was left of my apartment, went out on the back porch, and I didn't cry for help, and I didn't reach out, and I wasn't making a showing, and there wasn't anything except I was just done. And I tied a rope over the rafter on the apartment above, stepped into a chair and kicked it. I was done. Amazingly, that was August 1st of 2015, or 2005, I'm sorry. Um, Amazingly, my ex-girlfriend came to check on me and found me there hanging dead. She cut me down, called the police, called 911. The cop cut his hand getting the rope off my neck, and they put me on a stretcher and flew me in a helicopter and shocked me back to life on my way to a hospital in Fort Worth.
Mm.
And 9 days later, I woke up and my dad was standing at the edge of my bed. And I said, "What are you doing in Texas?" And he said, "Son, do you know what day it is?" And I said, "Sure, Dad. It's Monday." He said, "No, it's the following Wednesday." I said, "What happened? Did I wreck my truck?" He said, "No, you hung yourself." I said, "No." And he handed me a mirror. And of course, I had a huge scar
Oh,
on
you
my
didn't
neck.
even remember doing
I did
that.
not remember it at all.
Really? Now, were
Right?
you intoxicated when you did it?
Yes, I would
Okay.
been drinking
I
big Jack
gotcha.
Daniels and coming off of Coke, and I was a mess.
I gotcha. Okay.
I didn't remember it, and I started shaking and said, "Someone did this to me. Call the police."
Oh,
He said, "The
wow.
police are in the hall. They've been waiting for you to wake up for 9 days. You've got warrants everywhere."
Mm.
And I was just shocked. I wasn't lying or trying to hide it. I didn't know. I didn't know I had done it. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
remember. And they, of course, put me in a mental hospital. And I was in there with some very rough characters. Andrea Yates was one of them. And I spent some time in there and did not believe. Every week I went to my treatment team and they said, "Tell us about the hanging." I said, "I don't know who did it to me or when or why, but I didn't do this," for about 3 or 4 months. And then one day walking the track, it was like somebody opened the curtains in my life and I remembered everything. The chair,
Really?
it all came to me. And two things happened right then. First, I was overwhelmed at what I had done. But more than that, I was absolutely devastated that my mind had been lying to me all this time. And
Well,
I
and
broke it.
even sober, because you said it was 4 months later. So
Yes.
I mean, it's one thing to go, okay, I'm blackout drunk, not to discount that, but that's understandable that you're not going to remember but it's like, how fucked up is my mind
Right.
that it's yeah, man. Oh man, that had to be a trip.
It was. And it was so devastating that I went into some kind of freaked out
Oh, I
state. And they
can't
put me
imagine.
in a
Yeah.
rubber room, which is
Mm.
what they do in mental hospitals when you're freaking out. And a nurse came and she looked at me and she said, "Did you remember?" And I just snot slinging, crying, nodding, couldn't even get the words out. And she said, "Let him up." And the guard was like, "No." She said, "Let him up." And we walked and talked. And I said, "I can't believe I did this, but I did." And then I went back to the treatment team and I told them. And they looked at me and said, "How do you feel about what you did?" And I said, "Well, I've learned something. Suicide is cowardly." Because I never in that moment thought of my family, my friends, the people that love me, what I was doing to them. I thought only of my misery, only of me. And I was a chicken shit
Mm.
to not see the bigger picture. And it was selfish and cruel. And I'm very angry about it. And they said, "Well, you know that we're going to have to send you back to jail now. And you're going to face your charges." And I said, "Oh, I'm not scared of facing charges, jail, consequences. In fact, that's necessary and good. I'm okay with that. What I'm scared of is my mind that I don't understand." And I had some time to sort it out. So some time went by, and I got out. And even that, believe it or not, was not enough.
Mm.
I drank and used again. But on February 4th of 2015, I was face down in my backyard, 6 in the morning, trying to choke down a drink because I was in such bad shape. And I laid there in the grass and I looked at that drink and I poured it out. And I said, "Okay, God, I'm done. I don't know how I'll make it. I don't even know if it's possible, but I'm done. It's up to you." And I haven't had the need to have a drink or any drug in my body since that day, which is a miracle for a guy like me who spent decades destroying myself and everyone around me, every
Mm.
relationship, every job, everything. And I surrendered that day. There are no external factors that are enough for me to get sober. Not the love of my family, not the risk of my life, my freedom, my jobs, my housing, none of it. None of that mattered until I reached a point of surrender. And so I learned a lot about giving up. And my sponsor says often that God knows what he's doing. And just because I don't know what he's doing doesn't really mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that was profound, because if God sat down and said, here's the plan for your life, I promise you, I would immediately set to it and say, well, what if we,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how I am. I think I can influence or change or impact. And it's not my job. It's not even my business what he's doing with my life. I just need to have faith and hold on for the ride, do the best I can with what's right in front of me, and keep moving forward. And it's been an amazing, terrifying, awful, wonderful journey with incredible things happening, lots of hard consequences and difficult things. But just after I decided to surrender, I, of course, had to go back to jail for more consequences. And I did. And while I was in there, I prayed every day on my knees on that old concrete floor. And I said, God, just give me the chance. I know it won't be easy. I won't complain. I will take it with a glad heart. And when I got out, he did give me the chance. It's been a few years now. And he gave me the life that I asked for. And it hasn't been easy. I lost my little sister. My best friend died of COVID a year and a half ago. Lost both my parents. It's been rough. And in my moments where I was so bitter and sad and hurt, I remember that promise that I said, I'll take it with a glad heart. And I put myself in check and say, Andrew, you asked for this. So I slow myself down when I get like that, because it happens. And I don't feel like keeping my promise. And I remind myself that I made this deal. God's not Monty Hall. He's not a DA that you can make a deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But I made a deal. I promised that I'd take it with a glad heart. And so when I get caught up in the pain, I slow myself down and say, get your heart glad, Andrew. You got what you asked for. So today, it's different. It's about sharing what's been given to me, because I haven't earned it. I don't deserve it. If I got what I deserved, oh, man, it'd be awful.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't get what I deserved. I got what God gave me. And I can't earn it. I can't pay for it. I can't repay him. But I can do the best I can with it. And that's my goal each day, is to wake up and do the best I can with what I've got. And that means regular meetings for me. 8 years, 5 months, and 3 weeks ago today, I had that last drink in the grass in my backyard and my puke. And I go to those meetings and see guys who are right there and remember and go. And I need to be reminded of who I was that moment, and the horror of that moment and the beauty of it, that I got beat to death by my choices and finally said, okay, enough. I had to go pretty far down. But unlike many, I was able to come back out. So many can't or don't. And I'm so grateful that I was given what isn't given to everyone. And I don't know why me. I don't even need to know. It's none of my business. I know I'm here. And today I've got this, and I'm doing the best I can with it. And that's not always great. I screw it up pretty often. But I get up and do better the next day and keep going forward. And that's made me who I am. I'm open about my sobriety. I tell my friends, neighbors, and even customers sometimes, this is part of who I am. You know, because anybody can look me up and see that I've got a sordid past. And I want them to know that I was that guy, but I'm now this guy. And most people, surprisingly, are very accepting of that. Some people want me the hell away from them, and that's okay too. They have that right. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Well, and thank you for sharing that. You know, I wanted to I want to mention something that you said when you went into that first rehab, where the nice lady said, we can't have you here because you need to medically detox." And I recorded a show yesterday, and happened to that happens to a lot of us, because the simple fact is that alcohol is the only drug that you can die from the withdrawal. You
Yes.
can die. Not you want to, not you feel like you want to die. Yes, that's a check. But the fact is you can die from the withdrawal of alcohol. So if you are in this position, and or you have a loved one that's in this position, please do not allow that. Don't allow yourself to try to detox by yourself. At a bare minimum, make sure you have someone near you that can get help should you have an issue. But the fact of the matter is a medical detox is the only safe way when you've been drinking, like a lot of us end up doing.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, Andrew, it's not funny, but funny, ironic. We had a ladies AA meeting this morning that I chaired, and we were talking about the topic was fear, and I said, I even said, even 11 and a half years sober, I still can't trust my mind. I
Yeah.
still, and again, praise God for this program, and the fact that I have a sponsor and I have sisters in sobriety that have will not hesitate to call me on my shit. I'll go to make a decision, and I'm just thinking, and I'll make a phone call to my sponsor and go, okay, this is what I'm thinking. Am I crazy? And she's like, yep, you're crazy. Don't do
Mhm.
that. We don't do that anymore. Have you thought of it this way? Or have you, considered this? And it's like, there are times where I still can't trust my mind, just because the obsession to drink has been removed. And yes, I'm actively
Yep.
working a program, but I still have that ism, if I'm
Yeah.
not real careful.
You just reminded me of a powerful thing someone once said to me after I had tried and failed so many times to get sober. Um, my sponsor then asked me what was happening. Why did I keep doing this? And I said, well, I kept trying to get back to be the guy that I used to be before I drank. And I just want to be that guy again. And he said, do you mean the guy who took a perfectly reasonable life and threw it away for alcohol?
Ooh, ouch.
Maybe it isn't that you're not getting back there. Maybe it is that you're succeeding in the wrong goal. Why don't you try to become some guy that you've never been before? And I was like, wow, I've been
What a
going about this all
concept,
wrong.
right? What a
Because I am that guy. I
concept.
am that guy that was a full grown teen nearly in my 20s and decided alcohol was a great thing to add to my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept getting back to being that guy and kept making that same decision and had the same results. So, yeah, he said, become somebody new.
Yeah, and I've often heard it, like, for me, it felt like I had to be broken into it felt like a million pieces,
Yeah.
so that my higher power, who I choose to call God, could put me back the way that I was supposed to be.
Yes.
If allowed, right? Because I had the choice to not have that happen. But yeah, and I love what you said about, this is not our plan. I mean, this is not our plan. And the minute we start to fool ourselves thinking that it is our plan, the minute we start behaving as if we have remotely some control over this plan, is the minute that we find ourselves in trouble and at risk of being back there, once again, relatively quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I sure went back to it over and over.
Wow.
I'm so grateful that I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to go back to it. Um, yeah, not today.
Yeah. So how do you start your day?
My morning is quiet meditation. I'm a journaler. That's important to me.
Yeah.
I take some time to write down what I'm thinking and feeling, and that seems to like put me on track.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really enjoy the big book and the information in it. And pages 86 and 87, talk about looking at the day ahead
Upon awakening.
and how,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I read those and sort of reset myself daily because each day is different and special and it's unique and it's one individual opportunity to do right what I have done wrong so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at that as a both an exciting challenge and the serious consequences that come with not doing it right.
Right. So
But I've done a lot of
do you
that.
sponsor other people, other
I
guys?
do.
Yeah.
I do. I have a couple of sponsors. I even have a Zoom sponsee who lives in Ireland, and that I've never
Okay.
really had that kind of connection. But it's a brave new age, and we're actually very close. It's been a real blessing to me, and I keep trying to tell my sponsees. I said, you guys do more for me than I can ever do for you.
Explain that. See, and again, this morning I had someone. She made the comment. She's only about 3 weeks into the gig, and we were talking about reaching out to our sponsors, and she said, I just don't want to bother her, and I'm like, oh girl,
Huh. Yeah,
please bother. It is not about
absolutely.
you. you know so explain that to someone who doesn't understand how our program works,
Well,
how that works.
yeah. Well, we often, as alcoholics, we get caught up in ourselves real easy.
Mhm.
And it is not uncommon for me to be caught up in self and get a call from somebody who's going through some horrible, horrible shit. And I'm immediately relieved of that selfishness and think of what that was like and remember how it was and how he must feel. And I have, they say relieved of the bondage of self. And it's amazing how that can do that when
Mhm.
you're of service to others. Whether or not I get through to them or reach them or it's kind of funny because I once said something about to my sponsor about a sponsee that was doing really well. And he said, "You need to be careful." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I hear a little pride in your voice. And if you're going to take pride in his success, you better be ready to
I
take
totally
responsibility
get
for
that.
his failure."
But it's so hard. It's so hard because I know. I
Yeah.
totally get that. That is a
Yeah.
slippery slope.
Yeah. It's not about me. Um, this is my journey. And if I can share it and some of it's helpful to another, that's awesome. But I, I can't be the guy that changes, fixes, or manages or controls anybody else.
Mhm.
Not even qualified to do that in my own life, much less anybody else.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
that happens, it's just funny how it's just funny how God works in my life as far as that goes, because I will get in that type of frame of mind and something will literally twilight zone my ass back to March 14th, 2012, when I was preparing to take my life. Um and that humility comes gushing, and it's like, okay, sister, you don't have no business taking credit for anything that and I got to tell you, on the flip side of that too, when someone is overly congratulatory, giving accolades for me for being sober, and as far as I've come and all that, it's like a hot potato, because it's like, no, 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 I can't take credit for that. I cannot take credit for I cannot take credit for my recovery. I just can't, because left to my own devices, I would
Yes.
have checked out a long time ago.
Yes. And
You know.
I was a lot of almost everything that I say is what I've heard and been taught and been given. It's all just shared. It's
Mhm.
not really independently generated from me.
Mhm.
But it just it strikes me as humbling to not be the guy with the answers because I'm not. Um, I get to thinking I know something, and I'm usually headed for some dangerous waters.
Mhm.
My sponsor likes to say the research is in. We cannot
That's
we
rude.
cannot deny it. Yeah. Yeah, the results are final. The research is in.
Right?
You can drink and
The
use
evidence
successfully.
is here,
Mhm.
sir.
Yeah, yeah. And this is when I was
Shit.
coming and going a lot. He said, "How many times do you need to prove this to yourself that you can't drink or use successfully at all, at any level, at any time? When will you accept that?"
Mm.
And I didn't until I was face down in the grass. And it took me a long time. I recently opened a keepsake box and there was 13 30, 60, and 90-day chips in
Oh,
that box. And those are just the
wow.
ones I kept. There's probably many more that came and went in and out of my life.
Mhm.
I looked at those and remembered that and thought, wow, there's a reality check.
Well, and two, tell me about because you in your story there was some gaps in using, whether it be you were incarcerated or you were in treatment where you were away from and no longer had substance in your body, but you said you went back out. You know,
Yep.
there is a misnomer that a very sad mistaken idea that you can come into recovery, you know, which I'll let me back up real quick because I fully was disappointed in the fact that I thought these people in these rooms were going to teach me how to drink responsibly.
Yes.
Right? We're going to show me how to do it properly. They failed miserably at that. But tell me about how long did it take you? What I was going to say is that you know people think that you know after they you know have been sober for a couple of years, you know they'll just have a drink here and there, or you know how was it for you when you came out of not using and for a while and then picked up that first drink or drug? How long did it take you to realize that you couldn't do that normally?
Well, for me, it was all about not feeling the way that I felt because the very first time that I did drugs, I was in the middle of a breakup and didn't want to feel that way and said, I've always wanted to try this. I'm going to go ahead today. And it absolutely solved that moment's problem. I did not feel the way that I felt 30 seconds before.
Mm,
And I learned a truth that was an absolute lie right then that if I want to feel different, I just need to use this and that will solve it. It doesn't, it defers it for a moment, but it doesn't solve it. And that truth I held on to, exhaustingly and over. And I just wanted to feel different.
mm-hmm.
So because I never learned how to cope with how I felt, I always returned to my poison of the day, whatever it was. And it's not nearly as important, whatever I was using, as is the solution.
Right.
I didn't know
So
that then.
so did it take you cuz I know you were talking about college years through a couple of marriages. So that's a number of years. So did it take you when you went back out, did it take you several years to hit the wall again?
Oh no, when they tell you that you return and start where you left off and then at a faster pace, I've proven that to be true repeatedly.
Okay, so say
Uh,
that one more time. Define that
so
for someone who doesn't know what that means.
yeah, the period of time that passes in between is sort of irrelevant. But if you have an abstinent period, and I won't call it sobriety because it's hard to return to dope if you're or alcohol if you're really working on your sobriety. But if you
Right.
have a period of abstinence and you return to the madness, whatever that may be, you pick up where you left off, and it normally goes at a faster, more
Mhm.
accelerated, and more dangerous
Yep.
pace. That
That's
always proved true for me. I'd heard that, and I didn't really believe it until it proved out true in my life.
mhm.
But yeah, you go right back where you started, or worse, right off the bat, and it goes way faster down the hill.
Mm.
It's dangerous and scary business, and many people don't get back. And that's one of the things, I guess it was 2 years ago on New Year's Eve. I was 1 in the morning sitting outside of the hotel and looked down at my feet, and there was a cold Bud Light right there, unopened can. And it was
Mm.
like 2 degrees in Wisconsin then, and my first thought was, man, I bet that's cold. And I picked it up and literally put my fingernail under the tab. And I was like 6.5 or something years sober at that time. And I literally had my finger under that tab before I dropped that thing and looked at it like, what the hell just happened?
Wow.
They say no defense against that first drink.
Right.
And normal reaction, I'm so broken still today that my reaction to that is, oh, that'd be great. When everything in my life has proven that it's not great, it never ends well. There's no, like my sponsor said, the research is in, but I still react. And when I act on those without thinking or talking to someone or doing something good to get out of myself, I can be in trouble real fast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exempt. I don't have a shield of protection, and the days that have accumulated will mean nothing if today doesn't mean something.
Right.
So, yeah,
You
I
get a
was able to
daily
walk away from
reprieve.
that, but it was pretty spooky. I still remember that moment real
I
vividly.
bet. Well, and it says in our book that we'll recoil as if it from a hot flame. It's that oh shit moment. It's like, are you? Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Well, for me and as of recent, we'll go to a restaurant and there'll be a couple over here at this table and they have mixed drinks or whatever and it's nothing for me to just know. You notice the people sitting around you, but then they get up to leave and their drinks are still like half full. And I'm just like,
Right.
sit your ass down and fit. What is wrong with you, quitter?
Yeah.
I still have that thinking that's so stupid and crazy to,
Mhm.
I would imagine, a normal person. But that's still that ism, and that still is lying dormant, within me right now, just waiting, to be activated at a weak moment. Now, one of the things that like recently I've had a couple of people that I've met that are not not in a program, but when I make mention that I'm headed down to an AA meeting, they're like, oh, you still have to do that. Yeah. And it's like, oh, no, I get to make
Yeah.
no mistake about it, honey. I get
Right.
to go down to a room full of people that are just as crazy as I am, okay, that I can say anything. I can say anything to them, and the mirror that is the them looking at me doesn't change. Their view of me doesn't change, and they don't want to fix me, they don't want to save me, they don't want to shame me. They just want to help.
Yeah.
You tell me who out there on the, I mean, I know my husband, he's very I use the word jealous, but you know what I mean. He's like,
Yeah.
you get to go down there and throw your shit on the table and have people who care about you go, have you thought about this, or would you think about this, or let's talk about this. He said, I don't have that. I,
Right.
I don't have that. And I'm like, well, you could go to Al-Anon, which was, that's a running joke in our house. Anyway, God love you, Al-Anons. Do not write me letters. Do not write me
Right.
letters. I love you, Al-Anons. You helped save my husband. But so tell me how that is, for you. I mean, and
Well,
your
it's
outlook on the future of your sobriety and your recovery.
a few years back, my wife and I were recently married, and was going to my meetings pretty consistently. And she asked me, why do you go to those meetings? And it's a hard thing to explain to somebody who's never been there or known anybody
Right.
in recovery. And I did the best I could, and I probably did a poor job of it. And she said to me at the time, I don't know. I think you're surrounding yourself with people who are still part of that world, and you should get away from it, and it's not good. And I couldn't really convey what was happening in those meetings and how important they were because I didn't have the words.
Mm-hmm.
But time did for me what my words could not. And just a few weeks ago, she said, seems like you haven't been to as many meetings lately. And I looked at her and thought, what's that all about? She said, you're different when you go regularly. And I went, wow, that's evidence and observation from somebody who's been looking at
Right.
it from the outside in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the impact is real and lasting, and it's visible in our lives. Um,
Well, and
when
I
I
got.
fall short,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, when I fall short at shows and when I'm more devoted and dedicated, my life is different because my actions and my thinking is different.
It shows as well, right?
Yeah,
I
left to my own devices, like you said, my mind's a terrible place to play.
Yes, yes.
It's
You don't want to go there
dangerous as
after
hell.
dark, right? Well, and I got to tell you, what is your wife's name?
Patty.
Patty, you might consider, I don't know if you have, and I'm just speaking from experience here, you might consider taking Patty to an open meeting with you. I got to tell you, Rick loves it.
Really?
Oh, honey child. I'm just telling you that and I'm speaking to you because again, my higher power, who I choose to call God, I am a Christian, and I've made no qualms about that. I believe that we were put on this planet to have soul to soul connections, to see each other not as male and female and all the other bullshit labels we put on each other, but to see
Right.
each other as a two different souls. I see you, Andrew, as another soul on a path that God has you on, and someday we'll meet in heaven and have a fruity drink with an umbrella in it. But the fact of the matter is when you go into a room of people that have their guts hanging out, if you know what I mean,
I
and they're
do.
just being authentic and
Yes.
honest. Souls recognize that, whether they're one of us, earthly. Whether I've listened to Scott L recently, and he calls normal people earthlings. Whether they're an alcoholic addict or in recovery, not in recovery, or if they're a normal person, a soul recognizes another soul who's being authentic and honest. And I challenge you to let Patty go. Yeah, Rick will actually book us going to conferences.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Because most of the conferences, at least the ones around here, they have AA and Al-Anon speakers. So it's one of those things that you said you recently got married, so maybe she didn't get to experience you in your heydays, but
Yeah.
still, living with someone with an ism, is an Al-Anon, and I bet she would probably deem a lot. But yeah, man, Rick loves going to meetings and hearing people tell their stories, and just
Mm.
that like empowers him to tell his story, in an honest way in whatever capacity he can be useful to someone else,
Yeah.
although it's not an in an alcoholic situation.
Well, and our lives are so intertwined.
Yeah.
Not just in marriages, but work relationships, friendships, AA relationships. We impact each other with
Hmm.
even things we don't intend for others to see, or it just it's so we're in it together.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful,
It's
and it's a little
beautiful.
alarming because there's a responsibility that goes with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would challenge you to invite Patty into that world. I
I'll do
had I
that.
had a sponsee that got married recently to a normal, and I was able to say to him, I said, you have to come into her world. When you take one of us guys on, and this is my opinion, but I've also known it to be fact, so take what you want. But the fact is that Rick had to come to into my world and live. I can't survive in his world. I just
Right.
can't. I can't survive in his world. So him coming into mine was a necessity for our relationship to work. But again, he loves recovery. Quite frankly, he often says that he thinks the 12 steps ought to be taught in high school. What are you powerless over? Taking responsibility for your actions. Have you wronged someone? Have you said you're sorry? Have you made it those kinds of things, which are just basic character traits that, quite frankly, are lacking these days.
Yep.
But yeah, he loves being in the world of recovery, and our community is so our recovery community is so tight knit that yeah, he just and of course everybody's welcoming everybody. He's welcome, and it just he just loves it. It's the next best thing to him not having that type of a tight knit community like we have.
Sure.
So I bet she'd probably love it if you gave it a shot.
I think I'll let her have
Yeah.
that shot. I think I'll invite her to one.
Well, and it's so beautiful for someone we love to see inside our world and get
Yeah.
something out of it of value. You know, there are times where I'll hear him on the phone with one of our children, and you know, he'll say something that's programmed, you know, if you will, you know, well, you know, what have you considered? What's your part in that? You know, I mean, do you maybe need to this? And it's like, that's on page, you know.
Yeah.
Did you know you were just quoting the big book?
Amen.
So anyway, well, I am so grateful that you joined me today, Andrew. I think you're amazing, and I love your sobriety. And like I said, I'm very grateful. I know you've got a lot going on in your life right now, so taking the time to be here with me today, I'm very grateful.
You know, the main lesson that I've learned through incarcerations, failures, successes, is that if I'm not sober, nothing else matters.
Mm-hmm.
Not jobs, cars, marriages, houses, money, freedom, life, health. None of it matters.
Mm-hmm.
It is the first thing that I have to put first,
Right.
for all the rest of it to fall in place.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's why I'm sitting here right now, when I'm in the middle of a big crisis work thing. And because if I don't make this first and not just talk about it, if I don't do it,
Right.
then it becomes second, which is the same as last in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because if anything else is first, I'm in big trouble.
Right. Well, and along those same lines, I said in the meeting this morning too, as long as I'm sober, there's no big deals.
Yeah.
There's just no big deals. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can handle anything that comes my way, but I've got someone in my corner that can, so that I choose to hand everything over to. So anyway, I'm going to let you get back to work, and thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Randy Grimes, again, and Athletes in Recovery for sponsoring this episode of Purpose Driven Sobriety.
Christine,
All right.
It's been an honor. Thank you.
Hey, you as well, sir. Have a blessed day. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Purpose Driven Sobriety. Keep coming back.